Welcome,
Oh boy.
welcome everyone to the bonus action episode 3 of the Discussioneers podcast. This is where we don't really technically have a topic. We're going to talk about whatever we want. It can be related to our main topic, or it can be related to anything. We can also answer any questions anybody in chat might have, or if anything has been submitted to us in the past. So keep that in mind going forward. You can submit questions. Yeah, you can submit questions to our Discord and all that good stuff, or in chat.
Or right now in chat.
Right this very second. So I'm sad I didn't bring this up in the main show, but I guess this is kind of tangent stuff. I've realized this paladin is more broken than we figured out.
Oh.
And I know this because...
For the sake of YouTube, just to clarify, we are referencing to the main topic of episode 3 of our podcast, in which we talked about the unearthed arcana for the paladin known as the Oath of Heroism. You can find all that discussion in our main topic video, and yeah. So what is more broken than you thought?
So I've realized now that, especially today, like playing a paladin in one of your games, BB, not on the Dungeoneers, there's a combo which is also common for like fires and stuff, right? That would make this even more broken. So you have the extra attack as paladin, so you're getting 2 attacks, haste for another, and then I'm not gonna worry about the high level stuff. Like eventually you get like the reaction, like attack back, or whatever, right? If you then were to take the Tunnel Fighter fighting style, if your DM allows it, which BB has, which is an Unearthed Arcana fighting style, you get the ability to, as a bonus action, assume a defensive stance for the next round. You can make as many opportunity attacks as you want with it because he doesn't use your reaction. And as well, if someone moves with it more than 5 feet within your range, you use your reaction to make an attack. If you then also take the Polearm Master feature, when you take the attack action, blah, 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 that's not the important part. When you're wielding a glaive, halberd, pike, quarterstaff, or spear, creatures provoke opportunity attacks when they enter your reach. If you wanted to go even more on higher levels, for Sentinel, you could take the ability that you can, if a creature within 5 feet makes an attack on someone other than you can reaction attack them. You have the potential for making a lot of additional attacks that you have advantage, or not advantage, but crit on a 19 of.
So, I mean, yes, you are correct. But you have to also keep in mind the theory that you're crafting right now revolves heavily around another Unearthed Arcana thing, which is, of course, like you mentioned, the Tunnel Fighter fighting style. I think that brings up a good point. So, yeah, with that particular combination, that's stupid.
No ASIs.
Right, and you're not taking any ASIs, you're taking all feats. But here's an interesting point that I think we should all talk about. Is everybody here familiar with that fighting style, the Tunnel Fighter from the UA? It was like forever ago. I think like 2 or 3 years at this point.
I think they very specifically haven't updated it because I don't know if they intend on bringing it to actual play because it's a little broken.
That's the thing, because I have allowed it in the past, but even I have put in limitations on like my limitation is you can't attack the same target more than once or something like that. So even I don't allow it as is per se. But what's everybody else's opinions of that particular fighting style?
I need to look up the exact word.
And we probably should actually do that, since we're going to talk about it. We can't be super vague.
Sure, so I have it pulled up. So Tunnel Fighter is a fighting style which you get to pick at 2nd level of, I think, any class that gets it. There might be some outliers that I don't remember.
Yeah, you're right.
Fighters and paladins get at 2nd level. So you can pick Tunnel Fighter. As a bonus action, you enter a defensive stance that lasts until the start of your next turn. While in the stance, you can make opportunity attacks without using a reaction, and can use your reaction to make a melee attack against a creature that moves more than 5 feet within your reach. Now, if you're not using a reach weapon, that means they'd have to get up to you and then move side to side or something, right? Or be moving past you. But if you're using, as you really should be, like a reach weapon, that means if they move within reach and then move in front of you, as written, without any other abilities, with the Polearm Master, which I will go into now, you can stack a bunch of attacks, which is what BB doesn't like, which is, I would say, fair. Polearm Master lets you do an extra attack, which isn't really the important part as a bonus action. The main part is, like I said, while you're using these reach weapons, they provoke an attack of opportunity when they enter your reach, which with Tunnel Fighter doesn't use your reaction. So you can have a reach weapon for 10 feet, they step within reach, you smack them, and then they're moving another 5 feet within your reach, and you smack them as a reaction. So before they even attack you, you can get 2 attacks off, and then still be able to, if anyone else enters your reach, attack every single one of them once.
Yeah, that's broken.
Plus, you're going to be a Goliath and have that extra like 5 feet of reach.
It's bugbears that have the extra reach.
Bugbears, yeah.
Yeah, so you could be a bugbear, have a 15-foot reach, enter this defensive stance. Anyone that moves within 15 feet of you is getting at least 1 attack, if not one of them getting 2.
Jesus.
So you're looking
would-
at up to like 5 attacks on one creature, and then a theoretically infinite amount of others, depending on how many enter your reach, right?
I get what they're going with that fighting style. I mean, tunnel fighting is, it's a tactic that has been used in real life in many centuries. I mean, even in epic battles, like I can't remember off the top of my head what the actual battle is called, but the battle that the movie 300 was based off, it were a small selection of, I think it was not actually 300, I think it was like 3,000 or something, faced off against a bunch of Persian invaders, and they just tunneled them down, right? Like, if you can narrow your opponents down in kill boxes, which is a very common tactic, you're going to be more effective in taking out your opponent before they even get to even fight you. So I get what they're going with it. You're trying to lock down a corridor, you're trying to lock down a hallway, but mechanically implemented, this thing outclasses any of the other fighting styles by miles.
Especially now that you can get the crit on a 19 for a minute.
I do need to stop you there, and specifically for Matt, are you trying to tell me that Gerard Butler is lying to me and there wasn't only 300 soldiers there?
I didn't mean to have it brought to you this way. I thought you already knew. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. You're not alone. You're not alone.
I don't know the full factuals, but I know it wasn't just 300. They had some backup. I'm pretty sure. I'm almost certain.
Yeah.
So definitely, like, obviously though, that this is kind of redundant because the Tunnel Fighter Polearm Master combo is already game breaking. I think it's a lot of fun, but that's because it's so fucking powerful. And I'm playing when I've been fairly happy with the restriction we put, which is you just can't you can't hit them more than once, basically.
Yeah,
like if they enter your reach and then like keep moving around, you can't then use your reaction. It was something like that.
I think once
my
you
thing
start
was-
getting into feats, making things overpowered, and not even just feats, but in the game of Dungeons and Dragons, it states in the very first page that these are not rules; these are guidelines. So you have to, especially when you get into optional rules such as feats, you as the DM have to take that upon yourself to say, look, this is too strong. We're going to restrict it in one way or another.
Right.
And you can go just to say you have to use your reaction for the pole arm feat, but the tunnel fighter fighting style still, if you're using your opportunity attacks under the fighting style, that's fine. But when it comes into your range, you have to then use your reaction for that attack of opportunity.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just...
There's definitely more ways to do it. The way I do it is I just limit it so I don't even know. I'm using Bryce as a little bit of a play tester on how I want to make it go. But my rule, I just have a general rule that you can't attack the same creature more than once at all when it's not your turn. So until your turn, reaction or otherwise.
So basically, it makes and the logic behind it is because then you might wonder, like, well, isn't it weird? Like, the whole idea for that combo is you get the 2 attacks. The reasoning being is if they disengage, you can still smack them without the Sentinel feat and use that reaction to then hit them for moving out of your reach, right? Because as was written, it was a little ridiculous that you could get 2 attacks off on someone before they could even touch you.
Another way that I've seen people, which I somewhat agree with, but it can be a little too penalizing depending how you look at it. I've seen other people on forums and like Reddit and stuff say that how they change it and how they allow their players is change it from a bonus action to an action and then leave it as written. Because that way you're limiting what you do on your turn, but that just says, when it's not my turn, I'm going to fuck everything up. And rightfully so. Cool. You gave up your action. And honestly, and the more saying it out loud on this podcast, I actually like that more than any other decision I've ever made. So
the other way I'd suggested somebody do it is it's not only an action, but you cannot go into this defensive position if there's a creature within 10 feet of you. So if they're already in the doorway, you can't get set up in this defensive
Right.
position.
I get
Yeah,
you.
like because
You
if you're
can't, like,
taking
make
the
the
time to
proposal.
get into
Yeah.
your
Yeah, so
your
this has to be
stance, then
like a setup. You're setting up something in advance
Yeah.
for this to happen.
I like
You
that.
can't offensively go into a defensive stance then. That's the way I countered that.
That's
Which,
pretty
keep in
good. That's a
mind,
good suggestion.
as
too.
written, that is what the tunnel fighter is meant for. Because, like, if you assume you can't take feats, it's actually a crowd control where you're meant to get in the face of a crowd and then keep them from leaving because you get infinite attacks of opportunity. So you
Right.
you stop them from going away from you rather than it being a defensive like spear wall, which
Mhm.
is how it becomes with Polar Master.
Sure. That's a good suggestion. But yeah, I mean, that was just a tangent that I'm glad you brought up because that's just been one of those things that they've released an Unearthed Arcana that was super strong, and I mean, as is written, especially if stacked with the optional feat rules, can just become a big pain in the ass. Sure, it's fun for the player who's doing it, but for the DM, it's going to be
Very.
upsetting. Other players are going to be like, great, my fighter can't. My whole shtick is making more attacks than everybody else, and you're making 17. That's great. Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, 10 goblins into your reach? Well, you smacked 10
and
goblins.
kill them all. Great. So, yeah. So, I mean, definitely, my recommendation is if any DM is going to allow this rule, you're definitely going to modify it. And I want to piggyback that off what Nate said a minute ago. And, as DMs, allowing any rule, even by the book rules, rules at the end of the day are guidelines. If you ever think something is too broken, you are in your right to change it. Work with your player and say, I'm not doing this to penalize you. I just want to make sure it's a balanced game. Don't do it because, don't be a dick DM, like, oh, you're killing all my monsters. But like, it's just, nobody who is a player wants to feel like they're useless and they're, spending 4 hours out of their day or more playing their character who is being outshined in every way by some other guy.
Which earlier in the actual Discussioneers part, when we were talking about the ranged abilities of paladins, yeah, sometimes you're not going to be as good as other classes at certain things, but
Which is understandable.
That's how it's supposed to be.
But some things I think are
you're
just
not
too
supposed
extreme,
to be
right?
good at everything. Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're a wizard and you cast, Tensure's formation, whatever, and just become a fighter.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
anyways, that was that tangent.
I will say that, feats as well don't have to be broken mechanically to be like an issue. There are some that I know are DM's banes, like the Keen Mind or whatever, that allows you to remember everything. You know what time of day it is all the time. Some DMs fucking hate that because it's like, oh, what time of day is it, DM? It's like, why would I keep track of what exact hour and minute it is?
Yeah.
You're the DM.
It's,
It's
or,
4 o'clock.
what
What
happened?
It's as easy. It's literally as easy
DM?
as saying it's 6:30. Like, you did it. Congratulations.
Yeah. So I don't know, it's feats are interesting because I think they are something that players like Brian can very much be able to look at, and a DM might never think about and just fucking crank up the effectiveness of anything.
See,
with it a bit ridiculously.
That's where people who spend a lot of their free time, like our friend Brian, to find out all these crazy combinations come in super handy. Because like when you're trying to run the most balanced game you can, it's really good to just give some features in front of those type of suppliers and be like, hey, can you break this for me so I know how to counter it?
It's like hiring a hacker to like test your antivirus or like a firewall.
Yep.
It's like, can you get into this, and if so, how? Because we
Tell
need
me
to
how,
patch
because
it.
I need to stop you.
Funny,
Yeah.
that's a really good comparison.
So on the same kind of topic, then you wanted to talk about BB dipping, which is kind of the mainstay of Brian's usual argument.
You know what's really funny? I hate to put him on blast, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Don't we always?
He can't defend himself, so why not?
I got a text or a message on Discord at 5:25, so that's 35 minutes before we went live for this podcast, at least for the main topic. And he said, "Here's his exact words: BB, would you allow a dip into a third multi-class, like level 1, to grab something for flavor?"
I get those messages
For
all the
flavor.
time. As well. He'll just randomly message me like, "Hey, so what do you think of this? Of 3 levels of this, 4 levels of this?" And I'm like, "I hate you. It's fucking amazing. God damn it, Brian."
So, fuck, multi-classing
That man has
for me.
as a skill. Can we just like? It sounds like we're shooting on, but Brian has a mind that just sees the code.
Yeah.
it's
and
like
is
he
able to-
knows everything.
Yeah.
We give him shit,
It's
but no,
impressive.
honestly, it is really impressive. Like, a little bit of a spoiler because I don't think we've talked about this, but I guess we can talk about it a little bit right now. Myself, I started a project and I've brought Bryce heavily into it. I've dipped in a little bit to Nate's help and Brian's as well.
Dipped.
God damn, I hate the word, and I can't use it. I feel like I've lost a year of my life. But anyways, we're writing a subclass for each class of the player's handbook based on a certain theme. I won't go too much into it until we're done with it, but it's been really nice. Even last night when I came out with the first draft of a class for the fighter, I gave it to Brian specifically, and I said, break this for me, because we did the same thing with the druid. I said, break this for me, because we want to. It's really useful to have someone, because he does. He sits
It's like
down.
play testing.
Yeah, but he can do it like he just sits there and he just starts spewing out. But if you multi-class into this, and that's the biggest thing with him, is he figures out really quickly these multi-class combos that you wouldn't think of. Like shit. And then I have already made 3 or 4 adjustments just in that conversation him and I had yesterday to that class, because I was like, well, that's a good point.
We made adjustments last night to the druid because we shared it, and
Yeah.
he was like, oh yeah, these few things if you went to like other classes, and I was like, well, I would have
impressive.
literally never thought about that.
So we shit on him, but he's got a mind that's ridiculous. But we only shit
But
on
that
him
is
for
the
fun.
issue
Love
with
you, Brian.
multiclassing, right? Is it's one of those, it's like feats where it's an optional rule that is really cool and is intrinsic to like early D&D. Like that's where like terms like the Gish comes from, which I've played and have abused. That's a very common dip, is you can go start level 1 fighter and then everything else into wizard, and you are suddenly a wizard with 18 AC because you have all the there's no issues with wearing armor in this edition.
Yep.
You can just gain the proficiencies, use a shield and heavy armor, and still be casting fireball. You only needed 1 level of fighter.
That's a thing that's similar to the dip for me that I hate. I just never realized that there was a name for it, because it's the Gish.
Yeah, that's an old term, I think, because it comes from I want to say it comes from like the old like Gith Yankee and stuff. It was basically a specific type of, it's a spell sword. It's a spellcaster who can also do melee. It's an old D&D term. I
don't have a big of a problem with that in some cases, because my thing, I can't speak today. My thing has always been with multiclassing is I hate multiclassing in general. I think it's really cool to be able to, effectively come up with these combos that you're, essentially making your own class, because you're, taking certain utilities from 2 different ones and kind of coming up with your own flavor. And of course, I think by the book, right in the player's handbook, it says you're sacrificing power for utility or something like that.
I mean, take Marskit, for example, right? He's a character that, to make a bounty hunter, which is kind of what I would term his multi-class, it's a mix of ranger and rogue, which I would say isn't terribly broken, but also I'm penalized he's never going to have 5th level ranger spells, and there's some cool shit in there because I leveled into other stuff.
So I don't hate it, and I've always told everybody that plays the games, I encourage them, if you have some multi-class stuff you want to do, that's great, but I just feel like the biggest thing for me is like, there needs to be an RP reason for it.
That was going to be my question, yeah.
The biggest thing for me is there is players out there, and I've played with a few of them, that do the dip. And the dip is when you are just, not for the sake of RP, you're just taking it's usually 1 to 3 levels into a class just for the sake of their abilities, and there's no roleplay involved, and it's usually something like, I don't know what's a good example off the top of my head, because every time I just try to block it out of my mind every time it happens. But
let's go with the most common one, right? Fighter, paladin, rogue is the most typical champion fighter, paladin.
Champion fighter, that is the biggest one. Yes, actually, yeah. I don't know why I didn't bring it up. See, I'm telling you, every time I hear it, I block it out of my mind, because Curry literally made that example in the main topic discussion. Paladins, it's a common thing for paladins to just dip into fighter, because they just want the champion fighter ability, that having that extra crit. But realistically, in a lot of instances, there's no RP there. A paladin's already a melee divine person. You're just taking those levels just for the ability. And I get it.
Surge, bonus
I don't like it. I don't know why it grinds my gears so much. It's just, I don't hate min-maxers, but I dislike when min-maxers are doing things for the sake of doing things.
It's like when the game becomes more, or the game like supersedes the role playing game.
Right.
Like it is a game, but it's a role playing game.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think, I don't remember if I ever actually pulled the trigger, but when I played Hunaresh, did I ever actually dip into fighter?
I don't think you did.
I don't think I did. I think I was thinking about it.
I don't think you needed to.
I did. I could have, but that means going back. I don't think I've ever actually pulled the trigger and dipped into something.
You ever did a dip?
I don't think have you ever. You don't
like
think
a
you've ever
dip or a
multi-class. You've
multi-class.
changed classes, but you've never
I've
multi-classed.
changed class. Yeah, I used that wish, but yeah, I've never actually dipped a character for that reason. Like, it doesn't make any sense for me to like be a rogue for this.
I'm on the opposite
class,
scale. Almost every class I make, or every character I make, is multi-classed without fail.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen. At least you have not played. Actually, that's not true because I mean I shouldn't compare it to that because we played a lot of shorter campaigns that didn't go into higher level for you to do it. But yeah, I've seen you multi-class more than you and Brian are big multi-class people.
Well, like just for like Tuesday's game especially, right? Starting off with Ander was a level 1 fighter, everything else into wizard, who then eventually gained to cleric I don't think was he cleric then warlock, or was he cleric, warlock, or then was he warlock then
it was
cleric?
warlock, and then cleric.
Right.
depending
So
on
for
your-
campaign reasons,
and it was actual like backstory causing that though.
yeah, the
which
reason I took
made
warlock
sense.
and then became cleric. But so here's where I'm going with this is then my next multi-class was a druid barbarian. And none of these were like purely mechanical, like super amazing
That's my favorite.
abilities.
Mhm.
But they were just like I wanted a specific type. Like I wanted to be the spell sword, the spellcaster that could be in the front lines and be doing magic that wasn't an Eldritch Knight because they're limited on what kind of spells you have. And the druid barbarian was I want to be an angry bear.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to be an angry bear.
That
And I
makes
was
sense.
like, that's just the way to do it. But they weren't like mechanically broken like a champion fighter, paladin, rogue, whatever. But they did require multiclassing to do what they did. No other like combo or single class could have done that.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think I would have any problem with that, but like, yeah, there has to be some type of role playing reason, even if it's not in your backstory. Then if you come and you say, "Hey, I want to start going I'm a cleric, but I want to start going into rogue for whatever reason." Well, then these next 10 sessions, you better be in game training to be a rogue for some reason. Like you better be trying to pick locks and doing sneaky shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, think when Marsk dipped into rogue, that was around the time that he started the Rogues Guild and got the marks and whatnot with all the Warforged
Yeah.
and everything. Like it lined up in universe, and he was already kind of a shady bastard, anyways. But
Yeah.
you know,
So
it made sense.
I think that's the biggest thing because now I'm thinking about it. I mean, maybe dipping in to a fighter as a paladin would make a little bit of sense because RP reasons you can easily be taking more into your martial side of things versus your But I mean,
You better
things-
start doing some fucking pull-ups and push-ups every
But
session.
here's the thing, though, they
because-
already-
But that's what I'm saying. Like
overlap
it's
so
it's a little bit easier to fall into RP. But like your example, like when people are taking, classes that are just out there just for the sake of getting those abilities, and there's no RP. Like if you're a paladin, and you're trying to take, levels into rogue, but or you're the holier than thou individual who, because you want sneak attack or some shit, like you run into these issues where you're just dipping into these levels just to dip, and like I said,
Why
I
are
just
you
don't
a
like it.
paladin of nature becoming an assassination rogue? What
Yeah.
the fuck is?
I like using daggers. That's why.
I like to poke him
Well,
with a D4
Let's
and
see
then I
how
do
your deity
64
feels
damage.
about that next time you want to smite somebody and see if
Right.
you don't get smite yourself.
Right.
I'm
So-
curious from you, Curry, since I played the most multi-classes in your game. Like, have you at any point felt like aside from when I was cheating with cleric, that any of those characters like outclassed the other characters because of their multi-classing?
No, just the same old rogues and bards are bullshit, and it's not even you. You know.
I guess I was surrounded by some pretty big assholes
Yeah.
that were doing some rogue and bard
no.
bullshit. So,
Yeah,
by
once-
comparison, I was probably like low on the scale.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason why, like, thematically, I was basically like making like a custom class for you because I figured you were like a wizard that was using clerical abilities instead of more of an actual wizard.
Which is funny because they eventually came out with a subclass for that,
They did, and
which I played and never got to do much with. Fuck you for that.
Yeah,
Still
no problem.
upset. Fucking Tuesday.
Yeah, it's not as broken like what we did was not that broken at all. Just
There's definitely good ways of
except for
doing it.
except for you were casting 5th level spells with
5th level cleric spells is a 3rd level cleric.
yeah.
Yep.
No.
That was just doing it wrong.
Well, I think another thing that's interesting for me is like my whole take on multiclassing has been weird because like I don't hate it. Obviously I don't like the dip, but maybe it's possible. And the more I think about it, that there is the simple fact that for whatever reason, I don't know why, I have yet in my entire history of D&D played a multiclass character. I have not multiclassed a single time.
Yeah,
So
but you also play human all the time, so maybe you're just boring.
Maybe I'm
Maybe
boring.
just a
Definitely
basic
boring.
bitch.
Maybe I'm boring.
Definitely.
Maybe I'm just boring. So I don't know.
Human champion fighter. Haha!
There's some things where
Variant
when the
human
RP is
champion
there,
fighter.
it makes sense. Combinations are really, really cool. When multiclassing makes sense, like, a paladin who, I don't even know, a paladin who's like losing faith, and I guess you could even convert them to like maybe a Oathbreaker paladin out of the DMG or something. But then they can also start taking maybe
Well,
like
think like a mastermind rogue, like just a smart paladin that's like good at investigating or talking
Right.
to people, right?
So
Like,
there's ways to do it, and when you do those kind of things, and the RP makes sense, and you're coming up with a really cool way to introduce it with your character's backstory, then I'm in love with it. Please do it all by all means. But it's just when players just like, I want to take a level into that. I say why? I'm like, oh, just because I want that ability. I'm like, God damn it! Like I get that you want to have fun because you want to do cool shit, but like, dude, just I don't know. Maybe I just want the juice, or maybe I'm boring. I don't know. It's just how
I
it
just
feels.
thought of
I
imagine a
think
paladin that dips into revived rogue. Just I remembered I'm good
Oh
at
my
daggers.
God.
Smite.
I remember. Oh yeah, forgot about
I
that.
forgot this
I
whole
could see the
time. I'm
time.
really good with daggers.
We've said it 1,000 times now, but I really do think you have to take into consideration the role playing part of the role playing game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you can't be looked over, and almost any choices you make in this game, it really should always be considered, even if it's just the smallest bit.
I agree. I agree. I don't know. I
Shit, Tarek was going to be multi-classed, but
Yeah, you thought about that heavily for a long
yeah,
time, and you
it's
never pulled
very
the trigger.
very close to multi-classing into Warlock, 100%.
Into warlock, huh?
It was
I
very
mean,
close.
it's no secret why in the story of the campaign. If you've seen the campaign,
Yeah.
he's very very torn between two different deities. So
Yeah. No, that there was absolute RP reasons for that, and I would have loved it, but it's like you were on the fence this whole time. You haven't
yeah, I
teetered
think
over.
there was just story that happened to the point where he just has shunned the gods, and so
Yeah.
it was like, well, no reason to now.
I feel like it's made for the best. I don't know if you would have enjoyed playing.
No, and I don't
Warlock.
get
Well, that's just you hate the warlock.
Yeah,
I do. I fucking despise the warlock, but
and
Yeah.
it was
that's
for
me.
no reason
I've
other
tried,
than
and I hate
RP
it.
reasons.
I think the warlock definitely. I guess we can talk a little about that next. We can transition and change topics about our feelings for the warlocks.
I've got a couple topics that I've written down, or a couple questions.
And maybe we can do a full episode on warlocks, and maybe we can go through just the classes in general of the book. I don't know, but warlocks for me, a lot of people dislike them for good reason, mind you, because on paper, like what they were going for with the warlock was limited spell slots, but the ability to cast them always at your max level, and getting them back on a short rest. But
It's
in
the Nova
play,
class.
right, in play, it doesn't really work out the way they thought. I think they had a design idea for it back when, 5th edition was about to come out, and then in play, how the majority of how games play out in a adventuring day, you're doing so many encounters, and unless you're doing the one encounter per day thing, which a lot of campaigns I guess do too sometimes, I mean that's okay, that's fine. But when you're getting into these issues where you have multiple encounters, your party is just generally if it because they're on a time crunch or whatever the reason may be, they don't short rest as much as you think. So you find yourselves
Especially go base game. Like it's easier for us because we house rule short rest is 30 minutes.
Yeah.
For base game where it's a whole
an hour. Right.
you
So
just sit down.
sometimes time is super important to a lot of adventurers. So that short rest, none of your party wants to do it because they're just like, well, then the bad guy is going to be that much closer to accomplishing their task, or or the person we're chasing is going to get that much further away, and blah blah blah. There's just a lot of reasons that end up coming up in a lot of adventure design where the short rest doesn't become worth it, and therefore you're out of your spell slots. And granted, yes, you have your invocations, and some of those invocations are really good, like the at will spells and stuff like that. But we'll get to that section in a minute. So on paper, like warlocks are good in campaigns where you are short resting pretty much after every battle. Then your warlock is fine. But it just so happens to be that is almost never the case. There's very few games out there that I've seen that actually do a lot of short resting between encounters.
Isn't the design philosophy was 3 encounters, like 3 fights a day? Like it was like 7 encounters.
It's more than that, but
not all of them are considered fights though.
Right.
Like when they say encounters, but like even if you do 3 fights in a day, and this doesn't have to be session, right? This is within like a in-game day.
Mhm.
That's 3 hours you have to take out of your day now to short rest.
Right.
And especially if you have a party where no one else needs, like if you have fighters
Yeah.
and stuff that gain short rest stuff, they might be more, willing to do so. But why would the paladin or the sorcerer or whatever be like, why should we sit down for 3 hours out of our day when none of the rest of us are gaining bonuses from this?
Yeah,
Right.
that's where the RP there then
Yeah.
counters the part what the party actually needs.
Right.
And
I agree.
There's how many times when I was playing a warlock did I have to cast a spell? Like it was somebody was going to go down if I didn't break something with an actual spell slot right before an actual fight.
Sure.
Or that was going to be the trigger to a fight because I'm the only spell caster in the group. And It's like, okay, great. Now I have one spell slot. I'm going to save it, and I'm just going to cantrip the entire fight. But
And then you almost never use that spell slot because it never
might
came
need it.
into it. Yeah, you might need. It's that idea of like the worst version of potions, right? RP, like Skyrim, you hoard potions, even though you have like a bajillion, you'll never use them. This is like you actually only have one. You might need it for a shitty situation, and then that situation might not come up, and it's you never got to do the cool thing.
Yeah,
Right.
like there's one time we were on an airship, and I'm just like, okay, great. I'm gonna have Featherfall ready at any point in time, and I had to cast one spell right before a fight, and it's like there is a high chance we're gonna fucking fall off this thing. If I don't have Featherfall ready, we're gonna die.
Right. Yeah.
And it was like 5-6 episodes on this airship, and I basically had one spell slot.
So
And I did need that Featherfall. It was down an elevator shaft, but I needed it.
yeah, that's correct. So so on paper, what they were going for, it works, but for a select campaign, that again doesn't really come up a lot. So one thing that I do is I just take the design philosophy and I make a small change, but a very well needed change that has worked very well. I have an off-stream game that I play in person at a local game store here where I live. I have a warlock that uses this custom changed rule, and he loves it, and he feels like he's just as useful as anybody else. And that's just, you take the design philosophy of a warlock being able to have their spells before every fight, and you just have that be there. So what I do is 10 minutes of light activity. Don't got to stop. You can just be walking about. You could be on the airship doing your investigation work between, talking to all these NPCs. 10 minutes go by, your spell slots are back.
That alone almost makes it like tempting to play warlock, because this is my issue. Before I get into the other big shitty thing I hate about warlocks is what breaks my heart is they are actually one of my favorite classes, and I think I talked about this briefly before, for flavor. Because that RP, no other class I feel like gets something like all the other classes where you're tied to some greater power are usually benevolent, right? A cleric or a paladin, even a druid, are usually connected to good aligned things. Sure, if you're like an Oathbreaker, which is off the DMG, so your DM might not even allow it. Maybe you have something evil, but warlocks are like the only thing that get to be tied to an usually evil greater being. The only difference being maybe Fae, but even those can be like dark Fae, right? They can be like kind of on the darker side, which is wonderful for character building stuff. But the next thing on what I hate about warlocks is their fucking invocations are so all over the place. They have some of the most powerful things, like being able to cast detect magic or read doesn't matter if it's a language or whatever, they can read it. Runes, dead languages, whatever it is, at will, infinitely. And then there are ones like, You can cast Darkness using a spell slot once per day.
Yeah.
Using a spell slot.
Yeah.
This is an invocation.
Yeah, that is a good fair
doesn't
point.
matter because I'm just gonna boost up my one cantrip that I'm gonna be spamming anyway.
That is the usual. Like, it's hard to not just get the plus charisma for your Eldritch Blast, but the fact that I know you rule, I think you changed this, I believe, BB. Anything that says you use a spell slot, just you get to cast once for
It's
free.
just once per day for free, yeah.
Why didn't they do that to begin with? Because I don't understand why you would take some basic spells, like a lot of them aren't anything amazing, and make them use up one of your 2 spell slots at the
Right.
most levels.
Yeah. No, I
It
agree.
baffles the mind.
I agree. I think again, it just comes down to the point that people are the design philosophy of the class is you were going to be short resting between every fight, and therefore you'd cast your spell slot. Now we're going to get a short rest in, doesn't matter. But the problem is in play now that the game has released and millions of people are playing it, that just doesn't happen. So unfortunately, in order to have the Warlock be fun and be on par with other classes and be fun like any other classes, you got to make a couple of subtle changes, or slight changes, excuse me, to make it on par with the design philosophy. And that was, like I said, make sure, I changed those invocations where they only have those once per day, use a spell slot invocations. I ignore the spell slot portion of it. It's just a once per day thing. So that's basically like an extra spell you kind of get. And then, like I said, your normal spell slots, I give you a little bit of light activity, so you don't have to stop your whole party and slow down the game and whatever to short rest, which if you don't, like us, change the duration of short rests, like we said, wasting an hour of in-game time, nobody's going to want to do that every single fight. So you got to make those changes so the Warlock can still do what the Warlock is supposed to do. And unfortunately, on paper versus at play, we're two conflicting things with that class, and it's really unfortunate to see it get shit on so much. Rightfully so, but thankfully, at least in my experience, a couple of small changes, and it's back on track.
Don't you think it's weird that they came out with a revised Ranger but not a revised Warlock?
I think the problem with that the Warlock I think was rated low, but the flavor for Warlocks were pretty high. And believe it or not, I think right around the time that the revised Ranger was made, it was because they did a bunch of survey with a bunch of players and they rated what was the lowest class. And Ranger obviously was that lowest one. And the biggest problems they had were way different than what the Warlock were. Mm. Because the thing with the Ranger is the Ranger's whole thing was having a favorite enemy and a favorite terrain. And while you get some cool generic bonuses with those things, if you're running a large campaign or running a campaign that had nothing to do with any of those things, you just had these wasted abilities, right?
Yeah, man, it's been so long. I forget that is base like PHB. You choose a specific, I'm good in forest. And it's like, well, we're in a desert, you idiot.
Long form campaigns move all over the place. And then, you're in mountains, you're in the Underdark, then you're in a dungeon.
You're not in a forest, you're in a jungle. That's actually a different terrain. You don't
different
get
trees.
But even then, the Warlock still, believe it or not, the Warlock was not rated just above Ranger.
That.
Sorcerer was, believe it or not. Warlock was a little bit higher up the list. It wasn't high, but it was definitely there because. And the reason why, because people that played Warlocks were happy with this one thing. But I think it's a good and bad thing to the class. And that is, you basically had an invocation that you pumped into your Eldritch Blast cantrip, basically making it so you were an effective Ranger class using force damage, which is a almost rarely resisted damage type. And you were just pumping out these shots, and as that cantrip leveled up, it got more uses, so essentially extra attacks. And you were basically a Ranger with these Eldritch Blasts doing one of the best, if not the best, damage type in the game. That's great, and that's effective. That's one way to play the Warlock. But unfortunately, that means you have to use one of your invocations to set that up. It just kind of feels like you're forced to do it a little bit, and I don't like that.
Curry, what do you think? I mean, you probably could have gotten away without having that invocation, right?
No, I'm done. I'm done with the Warlocks permanently until they're completely
redone. Got a bad taste in his mouth.
Oh my god.
I'm curious with BB's rework though. Would you ever play one with that idea of basically every fight you just have all your spell slots?
That would help, but it would still run into the same problem where I have to save one, so I still basically only have one spell slot.
Well, why would you
So,
feel like you had to save one if you're going to be getting one shortly after the battle anyway?
because there's going to be a situation
only
where
have
I'm going to
one.
need a spell that's going to be a utility, and oftentimes you're the wizard, you're the spellcaster.
Gotcha.
If you
Yeah,
don't
because if it was
have
like
it,
a Guild's Tale, or not Guild's Tale, the Gears Lament even, where you were the only like major, you were, I believe, yeah, you were the only full caster. If someone's gonna cast like
You can't say full
counterspell or
caster
anything,
though. They're a unique
They're-
caster, special
yeah,
caster.
whatever.
a
You were the
corner caster.
only,
Yeah.
you were the only like
Yeah.
caster that got spell slots and spell levels at a normal rate, right?
I think
So
that was
depending-
an issue of bad party comp, really. We just put too
Partially.
much pressure on. I think the warlock is
Segues into one of my topics.
Oh, really? Do tell, because I think that was the case of you were put in a situation where a warlock is not meant to hold that burden of being a utility caster. You are damage.
Yeah,
If you are the
right.
one sitting back trying to cast counterspell, that is not what your class is for.
Exactly.
But yeah, like even then, I'm gonna want to have like counterspell ready, or I'm gonna be stuck in melee combat. I'm gonna want a spell slot to get me out of combat.
Misty Step,
know, I-
aha. Fifth level Misty
Something.
Step.
I think
Cloak with Misty Step 3 times a day. Ooh,
I think it's
yes.
just one of those things you need to know what you're going in for. You need to know that with that class, you're not a full caster. You're not a whiz or a sork. You gotta know your limits a bit and take the good with the bad. But again, as is by the book, it's an underperformer without making those subtle changes, in my opinion. But Nate, you said that you almost multi-class into one, and
Yeah.
I think that was before. You'll have to remind me if it was before or after. I
was
kind of made the
before.
decision to make those. So you were about
Yeah.
to do it by the book as was. So
Yep.
I'm curious on what your opinions were, and I know that you didn't do it.
I didn't
because of
know
RP
anything
reasons,
about
but-
it. All I knew is that warlocks made a pact with some type of deity, and that's
So you're
that's all
going
I
pure
knew.
flavor. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. What do you, I mean? So now that you've read more about it, or maybe heard more about it, like what are your opinions now, and like what are you thinking?
I wouldn't play it if it in anyone's game unless they're other than your rules.
Yeah.
Because you can't just be expected to just have. I can cast one spell one time, and now I need to wait and wait and wait and wait. Like,
Yeah.
unless you are just foregoing the fact that you can cast spells, and you're like, well, I guess I'm just gonna fucking play a strength warlock. Like,
Right.
that's really the only other reason.
I mean, there
And
is
keep in mind-
some subclasses that are like, say, saving grace. Like Xanathar's Hexblade is a really cool melee based.
Yeah, exactly, yeah,
So
you'd
you
have
don't
to
have
go
to
melee
take like
based,
your
yeah.
Eldritch Blast invocation that I mentioned.
But then you're
Um,
just an Eldritch Knight. You're just
Yeah.
a dork with a sword that made a bad decision to a god.
But
Yeah.
that's super cool flavor though.
That's no different than just using Eldritch Blast all the time. Oh, I'm gonna stab. Like you're still not doing much spellcast. I think it's the most useful warlock there is, but even like in the set of warlocks get their spells back so quickly. If you look at wizard at level 20, they get 22 spell slots total versus a warlock's 4,
Sure.
and they can use their arcane recovery to get up to 10 like slots of spell slots, not above 5th level, I believe, is the limit, the qualifier. Still, that means even if you short rest, that's 10 spell slots you're getting back. 10 first or 5 second, etc. Based on the level.
But I think again, you're trying to, just because you hear spell slots, I think you fall victim to thinking the warlock is a caster. I think it's just it's a fighter who has casting capabilities. I think it's supposed to be a hybrid. I mean, that's what the class is going for. I mean, warlock is still going to get access to a 7th, 8th, I think 6th, 7th, 8th level, and even 9th level spell bases on their Mystic Arcanum or whatever the ability is called, which is just a once per day thing. Maybe it doesn't get as many spell slots as other classes, but they're still going to get a juicy 9th level spell. And if you run it as the book and you're getting your spell slots back every fight, it's 2 up to, I think maybe it's 4 spell slots. Those are always going to be 5th level spells. So if you did 5 encounters in a day, or even we'll say 3, because I think 3 is probably the highest, most common one. 3 encounters a day, and you're zerging your spell slots every time. You're a high enough warlock to say you get 3 spell slots. That's, what is that? math, 9 5th level spells that you're still being able to drop in a day, plus, any of the additional mystical arcanum high level spells. So you still have some capabilities, but the point of the class is not to have, right, all of the casting capabilities of the wizard, because the wizard by default is not meant to be in the fray or have their ranged cantrip, which with that invocation becomes the best cantrip in the game. And
I mean, you can just take the elementalist feature or whatever, which adds your modifier to like firebolt anyways, which then also becomes, it's not as good as Eldritch Blast because you're not making multiple attacks, which means more times to crit. But
yeah,
there are still,
right.
if you want to be a melee wizard as well, you don't even have to multi-class. Just take Tensure's transformation, and suddenly you have multi-attack and AC and all this.
But isn't that a
extra
concentration
stuff.
spell?
I think so.
Because if it's a
but
concentration spell, that means one bad roll, and you just wasted that spell.
I guess. I mean, you're not technically wrong. I feel like you have some ways to mitigate that slightly.
I don't know.
That's very much a fair point. You could like be, haha, I'm a fighter, then
Yeah.
back
So
to wizard.
to me, it's
I'm
just
so glad I'm in the front line now with my crappy armor.
But hey, you've got 18 more spell slots. Just Misty Step out of there. You got 17 more to go.
My point
Sure,
is,
I'd do that, except I needed to cast shield to not, to get out of that fight.
my point is I think it's just one of those things that you need to know what you're getting into. It's not a caster. It's just it's a martial class really with spell and casting capabilities. I mean, you compare it to a fighter. A fighter makes a bunch of melee attacks per turn. The warlock is going to throw a bunch of Eldritch Blasts per turn. That's kind of even without their spell slots. That's the thing they mostly do. They play very similar, but people shit on the warlock because they want it to do more, but it's not designed to do more. And again, the other issues that we talked about previously, but I'm not going to repeat myself.
Yeah, and if you're a fighter, you can get like really cool weapons that will upgrade your damage. Where
Just different
Eldritch Blast, yeah, like, oh, you're gonna give me a wand that's gonna upgrade my damage, maybe. Well, that's not. Maybe if I take like another thing from my patron, possibly.
Rod of the Pack
It's
Keeper.
harder to
+3
implement,
on
I
Eldritch
feel.
Blast.
No, I mean, that's just up to your DM. I mean, any DM can make a magical items, again, are an optional rule. So it's just up to your DM.
I guess, but are you ever going to be like, here's a rod that gives you an extra 2d6 fire damage on your Eldritch Blast?
No, you can just, I mean, it may not increase your damage, but you could, always bump up their attack roll, or you can, give them another extra attack on the Eldritch Blast. I mean, there's things you can do. That does run the risk if you are using magical items, which even though I say it's an optional rule, it's common in almost every D&D game. There's a lot of D&D games that they don't customize their magical items, right? They just do the random roll tables that are in the DMG. And in that particular instance, if that's the kind of game you run, then your warlock will get shafted 9 times out of 10, because many of those magic items don't really favor the warlock. There is one, I think it's called Rod of the Pact Keeper, that gets them an extra spell slot. That's pretty good.
There's also Pearl of Power is huge for warlocks.
Oh, okay, yeah, because you can store spells into it. So
no, you regain a spell slot.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, okay.
Also, yeah, it's a fair point as well. Ring of spell keeping or of spell storage, where you can just store spell slots in there as well. Pretty big. Though I think that's based off of spell slot level, though, isn't it? So if you're a max level warlock and you can't store a lower level spell slot,
only up to level 3 years, I think.
Yeah, so it's I can't fit my magic in here because I'm too big of a swole warlock.
Well, actually, I don't know if that might be possible, because I think I'd have to check the wording on warlock, but because warlocks don't have like a spell chart like a normal caster does. They just say you have spell slots, and when you cast them, they count as this level. So I wonder if the wording would allow you to cast a spell that's defaultly a level 2 or 3 spell in there, and then when you cast it, just because you're a warlock, it becomes the 5th level that it would be. I would have to check the wording. I don't know, but that might be a way around that.
But so I guess there are ways of getting around it. I mean, for my game, obviously we're never going to find it now, so I have no qualms about sharing this. My idea and the reason it failed was on account of he never actually killed anything. But for Gull, his weapon was going to mitigate the spell issue of he was going to get basically invocations. He was going to get free spells, like you can cast this spell once per day. You can cast this spell, an additional spell once a day, that kind of thing. There are ways that your DM can mitigate it with magic items to make it more.
They have to cater to you a little bit more than, at least I would say, more than other classes, because other classes you can randomly roll and almost anybody can benefit from it.
Yeah, but like that in that situation, I felt like I was taking up so much of the DM's time, like off game, because we're trying to get this feature to work, and the fact of the matter is, everybody kill steals
Yeah,
because
I felt so bad. Gold is
could-
going around. Oh, come on. Oh, they're almost dead. Bah! Someone else
Like a
snipes it across the map.
martial class with a single attack that can't land a single hit.
They're prone.
ever.
Tink, tink, tink.
So I don't know. So
I mean, it's cool, but it just requires so much extra from the DM to make it fun.
Which
I
is
agree.
unfortunate.
It's unfortunate. You know, like I said, I'm all for making subtle changes to make it fun. I think it can easily stack up with a little bit of tweaking to somebody else. It's unfortunate it gets a bad rep because, like I said, it's just an unfortunate consequence to design. You develop something, and on paper you're like, it's fine, and then in play, the game ends up playing way differently than you thought. And unfortunately, we haven't seen anything out there to really change that, at least on Wizards' side of things. So I don't know, but that was our fucking 45-minute Warlock tangent. So we
Yeah.
move on to a different topic because it sounds like we're gonna just be going in circles if we continue going any further
Just
on
warlocks for life.
Yeah.
Is what,
Yep, we're gonna do an
is
all
what this
warlock
does.
campaign.
this. Yeah. Could you
All right,
imagine?
are we all gonna? Can we take a short rest? Yes.
Yes, right now.
Yes,
Right now.
Well, I
Um,
guess I do have something that kind of sticks along with the topic of
Hit us.
what we've been talking about for the past 2 hours is again a type of balance question is what do you think a class or a race or whatever should be balanced on level wise? Do you think it should be balanced on the most campaigns only go until level 12 or
Right.
whatever? Or do you think that every single class should be balanced 1 through 20?
So balance is one of the most difficult things to do, and especially now that we're designing some subclasses of our own, we're seeing that a lot. And I can't even imagine. I've prospected the idea of doing a normal class by itself, but I think the only ones of us here that have fully dabbed into it, I think, was Curry, because you mentioned before you were making a full class, right?
I made a custom one.
Custom one, right?
It wasn't really making one from scratch.
Right.
but-
So I mean, none of us have really done it. It's pretty hard, but I mean, flat out, I don't think anybody is going to disagree. Truly, power-wise, no class in D&D is balanced. There is not an overall balance. There's just some classes that perform more than others, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to when you're trying to balance a class there's a gauge. It's like an invisible number. You can't just say, I mean, sure, you can get into the specifics and do damage per round and
Do
shit
math
like that. And sure, that comes
who
into
wants to do math?
right. But if, like I said, even if you did that, you're going to find that other classes are going to still end up having a higher. So you really can't go into numbers. You really can't go into anything specific that you can calculate on a normal basis. What you really have to base it on is the level of fun that you're going to have from class to class to class. You know, how diverse is it? How unique is it? And then also how versatile it is. If a class can do everything, then what's the fucking point? Each class
But if it
has
can
their
do
own
nothing
niche.
like champion fighter, then again, what is the point? Because
Right.
you're gonna get if you're gonna play a campaign for 30 billion episodes in the Fungin, you don't want to be a champion fighter because you're gonna play 100 sessions, and by the end of it, you're gonna just you're not even gonna be paying attention. You're gonna be asleep, rolling the same dice, just
I think
like, yep, sure, tell me when we're out of combat.
that's a class, but I think that's a class balanced. Maybe not by the actual design, but the balance. The only way to kind of par it is by doing the math, because obviously they're the crit chance, fighter. But at the same time, like, you're right, every other class has some sort of cool ability they can tap into. It might have its own resource. It might have some other thing you can do. Whereas a fighter is just, I'm just trying to crit people, so it means I need to make as many attacks as possible. So
Yeah, I mean, I'd even say, like, this is the hard thing about balancing different stuff is I would 9 times out of 10 play a paladin over a fighter, no matter the subclass, simply because paladins get a lot of the same thing. They even get a fighting style, like fighters do. They get extra attack. They get all the same proficiencies, but they also get some spell casting, which opens up a lot of different options you can use. And they have their channel divinities and other things, right? That fighters aren't going to get. The difference of, an arcane archer would be something I would play because they have some cool abilities that they can modify, but that isn't necessarily based on any math or anything like, oh, this paladin's going to do more damage. It's the idea of just certain things have access to more abilities
Mhm.
depending on the level. Because then, you look at a 5th level paladin might have more access to, might be able to do more well-rounded stuff than a level 5 wizard. But that level 8 wizard, when they're level 18, is going to be doing a lot more than that level 18 paladin.
Exactly. So, I mean, flavor takes mind. You need to feel like you're filling your niche well, and you got you can't be doing everything, but you can't be doing nothing, like I said. And like I said, there's just numbers wise. Unfortunately, there is no way to balance everything because nothing already is balanced. It's just a matter of when you design something, it's overpowered if there's no reason to choose anything else. It's underpowered if there's never a reason to play it.
And here's
that's the best way to do it.
the issue. My favorite and least favorite thing about 5th edition is, since it's such a simplified version of D&D, there is so little wiggle room to balance things and modify stuff that it is very, very easy to swing between underpowered to overpowered. Versus you look at other systems like earlier versions of D&D or Pathfinder or Starfinder, and there is just a deluge of stuff, of math that you can
right.
tweak with. The different types of bonuses. Oh, you can only have one racial bonus at a time. You can only have one proficiency bonus. You can only have one historical bonus.
True.
But so you can modify, well, this gives you a +1, but then this other thing can give you like +2 for like, there's a lot more things to tinker with.
Yeah,
that
even though they're
balancing
more
is easier.
convoluted, that there's more numbers that you can change that
Yeah.
make it easier to balance.
Versus
Makes
5th
it easier to
edition, where
balance,
it's
but then the play is how much math can I do in the session?
And
Exactly.
it's a lot slower combat
It
because
is.
you're like, oh wait, this is supposed to have a +6 instead of a +4.
Yep.
That should have hit that. Let's go back. No. You
Oh,
didn't
they're
do the math
flat-footed,
right.
so they have a -2 to their AC, but I have this +3. They have all these different terms and stuff, right?
Yeah.
A lot easier as a game master to be able to, get noodly. But, again, that's why it's my favorite thing about 5th edition is it's so simple that it's not that complex to try and figure out.
Yeah, that's why when I did my 4th edition game, we were like immediately stopping the 4th edition one because it's really cool. I can take all these different things and they're cool thematically, but holy crap, you get into a fight and it's just so much math.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Turns in D&D are already long enough as it is. I can't imagine playing those older editions where it was longer. And I did.
Yeah,
I did play one of those older editions once. And
like going around like in 5th edition, you can go do it pretty quickly in like maybe like 5 minutes like a round if you're really moving. We were doing like 20 minutes per like player sometimes because
yeah, I believe it.
like they couldn't get their math down and there was so much of a learning curve. It's like
Sure.
that's really why I like 5th edition a lot more. Ugh,
You have a lot of universal things, and it's simple. Like the advantage, like this is something that I don't know
Advantage,
if a lot of you
disadvantage.
guys think about, because a lot of you guys came into 5th edition for like your first time. The advantage disadvantage mechanic
new.
is, it's new and it's beautiful compared to how it used to be as, oh, you have a +1 situational bonus. You can only, and like the way older editions in Pathfinder worked is each bonus has a title, right? So you have like racial, situational, that kind of thing, right? You can only have one of those at a time. So you can have a racial and a situational, but you can't have two situationals, right? So if you have a +2 situational here and a +1 situational for this ability, you only keep the +2. So you're going down this checklist of like, okay, what are all the different things I can gain to make this easier because I need this to succeed? Versus D&D, it's, well, I know, a +1 in 5th edition is massive, right? They consider that, a +1 magic weapon is a huge deal, even though you might think on paper that doesn't look very, big.
It's the way those skills level up, though.
Yeah, the way the game
don't level up
scales,
very-
that is
yeah, the scaling of the
big.
game is meant to be where a +1 is a way bigger deal than it was. It's measly in older editions, but a +1 is actually significant in 5th edition.
Instead, you're tweaking with advantage, disadvantage, and all these different conditions and stuff, right? Which is, again, just like reiterate the same thing, is much easier to play, difficult to figure out as a game designer trying to make new content.
Yeah, and in the older editions and stuff, would you get like, if you found a magical weapon, would it be like, here's a +12 magical sword? Because
You could
like
in higher levels, because keep in
Yeah.
mind at that point, especially if you look at Starfinder, which I'm a little more familiar than like later game Pathfinder, it is like you'll have like a 30 or 40 AC at like highest levels. It gets like super ridiculous math wise.
Jesus.
Better than negative AC. Negative AC.
Yeah.
It does
At
beat
least
out
it's a
negative
higher number and it
AC.
makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting though because advantage disadvantage. Well, it's a great system. It's a little bit of a double edged sword because those people who are, you know, super number driven, you know, I mean, you can very easily find it out. And I mean, these were already posted right when 5th edition was released, but people did the math on how significant an impact advantage disadvantage has, and it's pretty huge. I mean, granted, we're already talking a system where a +1 is pretty significant. I mean, magical items typically by the book never exceed a +3. You know, when you compare that to other editions of the game, or even like Pathfinder and stuff, when you get your plus to hit is way higher because your ACs are way higher. That's crazy. But on average, having advantage on a roll is the equivalent to a +5.
It's like
you know that?
4.6, but
Well,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And disadvantage, I think, is technically a little bit higher than that. But so it's interesting because it's such a simplified concept, and it makes things so much easier because you can't argue it. Advantage, disadvantage, everybody knows what it does. There's no math involved. It's just I roll 2 dice, and I take either the higher or I take the lower, depending on what I have. But the
Nice and simple.
mechanical
So-
impact on it, on average, is pretty significant. It's massive. So that's why, as the game has gone on, myself included, these DMs start to not hate advantage disadvantage because we love it because it's everywhere in the game. It needs to be there, but we hate granting it as often as we do. Like even me, the optional rule for flanking that grants advantage or whatnot, I have done the dipping into older editions and changed that to a +2 for my game just because of how significant that advantage can be, being the equivalent of a +5 or something. And not to mention, I don't remember what the number are. I'd have to look up the chart, but then just think of how more often you can to crit on with advantage.
When you have we're rolling twice.
That's-
Yep.
Yeah, that's
On top of
why
things that
I
crit
like
on
the
19s.
plus. That's why I like the plus a lot more because
Yeah.
it's way better for crits. It makes the crits more of an oh wow moment instead of a oh I have advantage. That's a natural 20, and it's so flat of a reaction.
Yeah, it's like, oh, imagine
Where
that.
if you
I've
only
rolled-
have that one die and you roll it and it's a natural 20, there's actually excitement at the table
Right.
for it.
Unless you're Tent Buster and you have disadvantage, you can roll 2 20s,
Yeah,
and then just
That's
everyone
twice in a row.
fucking
Yeah,
flips their
true.
shit.
But yeah, I
So-
mean, it's just like I said, it's a double-edged sword because it's so much easier. I mean, I still prefer it in most cases over trying to figure out all the massive earlier editions. I didn't play many of earlier editions, but I've heard horror stories, and I just like fuck. I would get.
I mean, do you want to
frustrated doing
know?
that.
I just pulled up my Starfinder book to give you the idea how noodly other game systems are and how spoiled we are with 5th edition. Looking at a level 1 set of heavy armor, you have a bunch of different things to look at. There are 2 different types of AC you have to deal with.
Ugh.
+1 to one of them and +2 to the other. It lists your maximum dex bonus because every single everyone tracks their AC based off of like kind of like how unarmored AC works in D&D, where it's like plus your dex and whatnot. You then have an armor check penalty, which certain skills gain a minus because of the heaviness of the armor, and then a speed adjustment. It lowers how much speed you
Jesus
have.
Christ. And that's just one
Go
armor
to
type,
then-
right?
That is 1 armor. And then you go to level 20 armor. It gives you plus 26 to your first AC and plus 27 to your second AC, plus 5 max dex, minus 2 arm check penalty, minus 5 feet speed adjustment. And that's not magical armor as well. That is base
That's just
in
armor.
the base
No,
cost
This is a lot more
level
math
20
involved.
armor. The numbers get kind of crazy.
But no, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. I see the good and I see the bad. I prefer it this way. That could be just because I played the edition more than other editions. But I mean, you can ask a lot of people out there and who have played pretty much every edition of D&D, and they all prefer it just because simplicity's sake goes a long way. But it is crazy to think about how just an impact that simple design rule has made in the game overall. But
Yeah.
But hey, I think that's a good spot to stop, unless anybody has any final things they want to say for this bonus action. I think for the first time, it only took us 3 episodes to do it, but we are well within our time window where we want to be going forward for our podcast. So I think there was some good discussion. Obviously, we got to dip into some more unearthed arcana in our main discussion. That's always good.
Yep.
And fucking there I am saying it. And we ended up having some interesting topics, and I want to say this probably, maybe not, maybe it will hold true going forward. But so far, we've done 2 bonus actions now, and we're obviously going to do one every time. But we don't have a game plan for this. We just we'll make some shit up as we go, and we've actually so far at least been pretty good at pulling some topics out of our butt. So, and of course, we didn't even take any viewer questions like we did last time, so that's only going to get better. But anyways, yeah, I'm rambling. That's probably a good sign for us to wrap it up anyway. So
That's bonus action for you.
That's bonus action for you. So we're gonna wrap up on out of here. If you guys want to check us out, we do live stream on our Twitch channel. We have a stream coming up on Saturdays. We have alternating campaign Saturdays. Next up is Guild's Tale. I don't know why I hesitated. Of course it is. And
Someone's gonna die.
It's gonna be me. And then, of course, every Sunday on our Twitch channel, we live stream this podcast before it pops up onto that YouTube. So check us out there. Check out our Discord. You can submit questions in a text-based chat or channel there. And anything else?
I have something to add to you guys can have this one for free. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead into the comments and leave your reaction.
Oh, for fuck's sake. That's really good. That's better than Bryce's stupid shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're stealing that. You're not allowed to trademark it. It's ours. Have a good night, everybody. We will see you next time, and don't let Bryce say his stupid shit.